Today, I want to talk about something that might make you feel uncomfortable: vulnerability. I know it's easy to think of vulnerability as a weakness, something to avoid, hide, or mask. But let me ask you this: when was the last time you felt truly alive? I'm talking about the moments that took your breath away. Were they in the comfortable, safe places? Or were they in the messy, uncertain, raw moments where you showed up as your true self? Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of creativity, courage, and connection. It's the place where everything meaningful happens. It's the thing that allows us to live and love deeply, to innovate and take risks. But here's the catch: it is terrifying. We want to show up as perfect, as strong, because we're afraid of judgment, rejection, or failure. But the truth is, perfection doesn't lead to connection. It leads to isolation. Vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Vulnerability has often been misconstrued as a weakness. We tend to associate it with fragility, insecurity, and the potential for harm. In a world that celebrates strength, independence, and resilience, it's easy to dismiss vulnerability as something to avoid, hide, or suppress. But what if I told you that vulnerability is, in fact, one of the greatest sources of strength? What if I told you that vulnerability is not a flaw, but a fundamental aspect of what makes us human, a force that drives creativity, connection, courage, and growth? Vulnerability is the courage to show up and be seen, even when we can't predict the outcome. It is the willingness to take risks, not because we are guaranteed success, but because we are willing to face the possibility of failure, rejection, or hurt. It's in those moments of vulnerability that we have the opportunity to rise to stand up in the face of uncertainty and show the world who we truly are. At its core, vulnerability is about being honest with ourselves and others. It's about saying, I am not perfect. I am not invulnerable. I am human. This honesty opens the door to authenticity, which is essential for building genuine connections. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we invite others to do the same. And in that shared space of vulnerability, trust is built, relationships are deepened, and love is nurtured. Vulnerability is the foundation of meaningful connection. Think about the moments in your life when you have felt truly connected to another person. Chances are those moments involved some level of vulnerability, whether it was sharing a personal story, admitting a fear or weakness, or simply being open about your struggles. It was in those moments that you felt seen, heard, and understood. When we open up and expose ourselves not to be judged, but to be embraced, we experience a deep sense of belonging. We are reminded that we are not alone and that our struggles, fears, and imperfections are not signs of weakness, but rather they are part of what makes us human. Yet so many of us are afraid to show up in this way. We hide behind masks of perfection, keeping our true selves hidden from the world. We fear judgment, rejection, and criticism, so we put on a facade of strength, pretending that we have it all together. We think that vulnerability will expose our flaws and that others will see us as weak, incapable, or unworthy. But the reality is, it's the act of showing up authentically, despite our imperfections, that creates true strength. It takes incredible courage to be vulnerable, to let go of the need to control how others perceive us, and to simply be who we are. Consider the stories of people who have made the greatest impact in the world. From artists to activists, innovators to leaders, it is often their vulnerability that has been the driving force behind their success. Think of herself, whose research on vulnerability has touched millions of lives. She has dedicated her career to showing that vulnerability is not something to be ashamed of, but something to be celebrated. Her work has proven that the most courageous people are not those who hide behind walls of protection, but those who are willing to expose their hearts, their fears, and their true selves. The courage to be vulnerable is not just about being open with others, it's about being honest with ourselves. It's about acknowledging our own fears, insecurities, and limitations, and accepting them as part of who we are. It's about being willing to lean into discomfort, to sit with uncertainty, and to show up even when we feel unprepared or inadequate. When we embrace our own vulnerability, we empower ourselves to take risks, to grow, and to evolve. We stop hiding from the challenges that life presents and start embracing them as opportunities for growth. Moreover, vulnerability is not something that only exists in moments of struggle or hardship. It is also present in moments of joy, love, and creativity. Vulnerability is the willingness to express our feelings, to show our excitement and passion, and to share our dreams and desires. It is in these moments of vulnerability that we allow ourselves to experience the fullness of life, to embrace both the light and the dark, the highs and the lows, the joy and the pain. Vulnerability is not limited to our weaknesses. It is also present in our strengths, our desires, and our aspirations. The myth that vulnerability equals weakness is rooted in the belief that strength is only about being invulnerable, impenetrable, and unyielding. But true strength is about being able to withstand life's challenges while remaining open and human. It's about being resilient in the face of adversity and at the same time allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough to learn, grow, and connect. It is this combination of strength and vulnerability that makes us truly powerful. In a world that often celebrates perfection, it's important to remember that true strength lies in our willingness to be vulnerable. It's in the moments when we let go of our need for control, when we open up to others, and when we show up as our authentic selves that we experience the deepest connection and growth. Vulnerability is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be embraced. It is a gift that allows us to live more fully, love more deeply, and connect more authentically. So the next time you feel that fear creeping and the fear of being seen, of being imperfect, of being vulnerable, remember that this is where your strength lies. You are not weak because you are vulnerable. You are strong because you are willing to embrace it. This piece explores the idea that vulnerability is a source of strength by highlighting the power it has to foster connection, personal growth, and resilience. It challenges the conventional view that strength is only about being invulnerable, and instead emphasizes how vulnerability opens the door to authentic living. In a world where social media platforms are flooded with curated images of flawless lives, where influencers showcase their best selves, and where professional and personal success is often measured by outward appearances, the pursuit of perfection has never been more pervasive. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us that in order to be loved, valued, and accepted, we must present a perfect version of ourselves, flawless, composed, and without flaws. But while the world may encourage us to seek perfection, the truth is that perfection doesn't lead to connection. Instead, it often results in isolation. Perfection may win admiration in the short term, but it is our vulnerability, imperfection, and humanity that create lasting bonds. The drive for perfection stems from a deep-seated fear of judgment, rejection, and failure. We want to be seen as capable, competent, and worthy of love and respect. It's easy to believe that if we can just look the part, act the part, and perform at a high level, we will be accepted by others. And so we strive to show the world the version of ourselves that we think others want to see, the perfect version. But here's the problem: perfection is an illusion. It's unattainable, fleeting, and unrealistic. No one can maintain a state of perfection indefinitely. The very idea of perfection is rooted in comparison, comparing ourselves to an ideal, to others, or to some arbitrary standard that is constantly shifting. Perfection creates a mask, a barrier between who we truly are and how we present ourselves to the world. It encourages us to hide our flaws, suppress our vulnerabilities, and present an image that feels safe and acceptable. But in doing so, we create distance between ourselves and others. We disconnect from our true selves, and we prevent others from truly connecting with us. In striving for perfection, we become more focused on appearances and external validation than on authenticity and human connection. We become more concerned with how others perceive us than with showing up as we truly are. This can create a feeling of isolation, even when we are surrounded by people. After all, if we are always trying to be perfect, we are never fully present in our relationships. We are always performing, always guarding ourselves, always worried about the impression we are making. And when we live this way, it becomes incredibly difficult for others to connect with us on a deep level. We may be admired, but we won't be truly known. Perfection also breeds fear of being exposed, of being seen as flawed or unworthy. When we believe that perfection is the key to acceptance, any sign of imperfection feels like a threat. We fear that if we let others see the real us, the parts of ourselves that are messy, vulnerable, or broken, they will no longer accept or love us. This fear pushes us further into isolation as we retreat into ourselves and avoid showing the parts of us that are most human. The more we try to hide our imperfections, the more we distance ourselves from the very thing that connects us, our shared humanity. Ironically, it's the imperfections that make us relatable. It's the moments of vulnerability, the times when we stumble or fail, that allow others to see us for who we really are. When we show up with all our flaws, quirks, and vulnerabilities, we invite others to do the same. We create space for authenticity, and in that space, real connections can be made. When we stop pretending to be perfect, we start being human, and it's in that humanness, the shared experiences of struggle, pain, joy, and growth that we find true connection. Think about the relationships in your life that have been the most meaningful. Were they built on perfection, or were they forged through moments of vulnerability and authenticity? Chances are the relationships that have stood the test of time are the ones where you have been able to show up as your true self, not as someone striving for perfection, but as someone willing to be real, honest, and imperfect. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to admit when you're struggling, to show up with your flaws, you give others permission to do the same. And in doing so, you create a bond that is grounded in trust, empathy, and understanding. The pressure to be perfect can also be incredibly exhausting. It takes immense energy to maintain the facade of perfection, to constantly monitor how we are being perceived, to control every aspect of our appearance, behavior, and actions. It's a never-ending cycle of self-monitoring, self-criticism, and self-doubt. The toll that perfectionism takes on our mental and emotional well-being is significant. The constant striving for unattainable standards leaves little room for self-compassion, rest, or reflection. We are so busy trying to meet the expectations of others that we forget to care for ourselves. When we let go of perfection, we free ourselves from this exhausting cycle. We give ourselves permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to learn and grow along the way. We stop trying to be something we're not and start embracing who we are, flaws and all. This shift in mindset allows us to show up in our relationships with greater authenticity and vulnerability, and it opens the door to deeper, more meaningful connections. In a world that often values strength, control, and certainty, vulnerability is frequently seen as something to be avoided. We are taught from an early age to toughen up, to not show weakness, and to always appear in control. The message is clear: vulnerability is a sign of weakness, and showing vulnerability means risking rejection, failure, and hurt. We fear being exposed, judged, or misunderstood. We fear the pain that comes from opening ourselves up to others in the world. And yet, it is in vulnerability, not the absence of it, that true courage lies. Courage is not about being fearless. It is not about pretending to have it all together or avoiding discomfort at all costs. Courage is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the willingness to embrace it, even when it scares us. True courage is the ability to show up as our authentic selves, despite the fear of judgment, failure, or rejection. It is the strength to step into the unknown, knowing that we may stumble, fall, or make mistakes along the way. It is the willingness to be seen for who we truly are, flaws, imperfections, and all. The essence of courage lies in our ability to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up to the possibility of hurt, and to trust that we will survive whatever comes our way. Vulnerability is not about being weak. It is about being brave enough to expose our innermost selves, to take risks, and to face the uncertainty that comes with living authentically. It takes courage to be vulnerable, because it means letting go of the need to control how we are perceived and instead embracing the uncertainty of being fully present in the moment. When we embrace vulnerability, we free ourselves from the suffocating pressure of perfection. We no longer need to maintain a facade of strength or invulnerability. We stop hiding behind masks of confidence, and we allow ourselves to be human. We acknowledge our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, and we own them as part of who we are. And in doing so, we open ourselves up to true connection with others. It is in our vulnerability that we find common ground with the people around us. We realize that we are not alone in our struggles, our imperfections, or our fears. We are all human, and we are all navigating this complex, messy, and beautiful journey together. Consider the people you admire most. Are they the ones who always appear perfect, composed, and invulnerable? Or are they the ones who have shown their humanity, who have been open about their challenges, their failures, and their growth? True courage is not about putting up a perfect front. It is about being willing to expose the raw, unpolished parts of ourselves. It is about allowing others to see us at our most vulnerable and trusting that, despite our imperfections, we will still be accepted, loved, and valued. When we choose to embrace vulnerability, we step into our own power. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a source of strength. It is the courage to take risks, to try something new, to step outside our comfort zones, and to confront our fears head on. It is the courage to be seen for who we really are, without the need for validation or approval from others. Vulnerability is what allows us to experience life fully, to love deeply, and to grow in ways we never thought possible. The path to courage begins with vulnerability because it requires us to face our fears and our insecurities. It demands that we let go of the need for control and accept that life is uncertain, unpredictable, and often messy. When we embrace vulnerability, we stop waiting for the perfect moment to act, the perfect conditions to feel ready, or the perfect version of ourselves to show up. Instead, we take action despite our fears and doubts. We take that first step, knowing that it may not be perfect, but that it will lead us somewhere meaningful. Embracing vulnerability also means accepting that failure is a natural part of the journey. We cannot grow, learn, or evolve without taking risks and making mistakes. When we shield ourselves from vulnerability, we protect ourselves from the possibility of failure, but we also protect ourselves from the opportunity to grow. Failure is not the end. It is simply a stepping stone on the path to success. It is in our vulnerability that we learn resilience, perseverance, and the strength to try again. Vulnerability allows us to embrace failure as a necessary part of the learning process, rather than something to be feared or avoided. The courage to embrace vulnerability also extends to our relationships. It is only when we are willing to be vulnerable with others that we can truly connect on a deep level. Connection is not built on perfection or polished facades. It is built on shared experiences, raw emotions, and mutual understanding. When we show up in our relationships with authenticity and openness, we invite others to do the same. We create a space where both parties can be real, honest, and vulnerable without fear of judgment. This is where true intimacy and connection are born. When we embrace vulnerability, we also embrace our humanity. We recognize that we are not perfect beings, and that is okay. We are works in progress, learning, growing, and evolving with each passing day. Vulnerability allows us to let go of the need to be flawless and accept ourselves exactly as we are. It is through this acceptance that we find peace, freedom, and self-compassion. We stop striving for perfection and start embracing the beauty of imperfection. We learn to love ourselves, flaws and all. And this self-love becomes the foundation for all of our relationships and endeavors. Courage lies in embracing vulnerability because it requires us to let go of control, face our fears, and trust in ourselves and others. It is the willingness to show up as our authentic selves even when we don't have all the answers, even when we feel exposed, and even when we are unsure of the outcome. It is the courage to take risks, to fail, and to learn from our mistakes. It is the courage to open our hearts to others and to invite them into our lives, knowing that we may experience pain, but also knowing that we will experience growth, connection, and love. So the next time you feel fear creeping in, the next time you hesitate to be vulnerable, remember this: vulnerability is not the absence of courage, it is the very source of it. It is through vulnerability that we find our strength, our connection, and our capacity for growth. Embrace your vulnerability. Lean into it, because it is in that space, the space where we let go of perfection and control, that we find the courage to be truly alive. This expanded version explores the profound connection between vulnerability and courage, showing how embracing vulnerability is a key to personal growth, deeper relationships, and true strength. It challenges the conventional notion that courage is about invulnerability, emphasizing instead that vulnerability is the true path to power and authenticity. In a world that constantly promotes the idea of fitting in, the concept of belonging often gets lost in the shuffle. We are taught from a young age to meet societal standards, to adapt to the expectations placed upon us, and to conform to what others deem acceptable or normal. Whether in our professional lives, our social circles, or even in our families, the pressure to blend in and be the version of ourselves that others want us to be is overwhelming. But the truth is, true belonging does not come from fitting in, it comes from embracing who we truly are, our authentic selves. Authenticity is not only the key to personal fulfillment, but it is also the path to genuine belonging. Belonging is not about being accepted for the version of ourselves we think others want to see. It's not about hiding our quirks, suppressing our true thoughts and feelings, or pretending to be someone we're not just to fit into a particular group or setting. True belonging is about showing up as our authentic selves, fully embracing our imperfections, vulnerabilities, and unique qualities. It's about allowing ourselves to be seen for who we really are, and in doing so, creating space for others to do the same. The search for belonging can feel like a quest for validation, a desire to be seen, heard, and loved. But too often, this search leads us down a path of inauthenticity. We try to mold ourselves into what we think others will accept, sacrificing our true selves in the process. We become so focused on the approval of others that we lose sight of the most important approval, the approval of ourselves. We forget that true belonging is not about fitting into someone else's mold, but about creating a space where we can thrive in our own skin without apology or compromise. When we show up authentically, we give others permission to do the same. The act of being true to ourselves is not just an act of self-expression. It is an invitation for others to be real with us as well. We create a ripple effect of authenticity where the people around us feel safe to let down their guards, to show their true selves, and to stop pretending. This is where connection begins. This is where real belonging happens. Belonging is not a passive experience, it's an active creation. When we are authentic, we foster an environment that allows others to feel that they can belong too. One of the most powerful aspects of authenticity is that it eliminates the need for comparison. When we stop pretending to be someone we're not, we stop measuring our worth against others. We no longer need to compare ourselves to the idealized versions of success, beauty, or happiness that we see in the media or in the lives of others. We stop trying to live up to someone else's expectations, and instead, we learn to appreciate and embrace our own unique qualities. Authenticity allows us to be content with who we are without needing validation from others. It teaches us to love ourselves, flaws and all. And in doing so, we create the foundation for deeper, more genuine connections with others. The act of being authentic also creates a sense of trust, not just with others, but with ourselves. When we are authentic, we honor our own values, desires, and boundaries. We stop sacrificing our well-being or happiness for the sake of fitting in, and instead, we learn to trust ourselves to make choices that align with our true desires. This self-trust is the cornerstone of belonging, because when we trust ourselves, we create the space to connect with others in a way that is both honest and open. We stop living in fear of rejection or judgment, because we know that our true selves are worthy of love and acceptance. Belonging is not a superficial connection based on common interests or surface-level similarities. True belonging is born from shared vulnerability and shared authenticity. It's about connecting with others on a deeper level where both parties are free to be themselves without fear of being judged. This kind of connection can only happen when we are willing to let go of the need to be perfect, to be accepted, or to be liked. When we stop pretending, we make room for others to show up authentically as well. And in this shared authenticity, we create a bond that is unshakable, a connection that is rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and acceptance. Another powerful aspect of authenticity is that it allows us to find our tribe, the people who truly see us for who we are, who appreciate us not for the mask we wear, but for the person we truly are underneath. These are the people who accept us with all our imperfections, who encourage us to be our best selves, and who create a space where we can show up without fear. These are the relationships that nourish our souls, the friendships and connections that stand the test of time. They are not based on shallow judgments or fleeting interests, but on a deep, mutual understanding of each other's humanity. The fear of being judged or rejected is often what keeps us from being authentic. We worry that if we reveal our true selves, we will not be accepted. We fear that showing our vulnerabilities, our flaws, or our struggles will push others away. But the truth is, it is in those moments of vulnerability and honesty that we find our deepest connections. When we,